Hi there tonight. We're going to drift off into a world that was almost ours. A world resting on the knife's edge of a single decision made in the spring of 1940. Picture it. The air is thick with the scent of salt and smoke, the beaches are crowded, and an entire army is holding its breath, waiting for a miracle. We are going to explore what might have happened if that miracle never arrived. And a gentle warning. In the world we're visiting tonight, your chances of a happy ending are, shall we say, statistically questionable. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post your city and what time it is where you are. It's always nice to see where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cold gray water of the English Channel laps at your boots, and you barely even notice. Your attention, like that of every man around you, is fixed on two things: the sky above and the horizon behind. From the sky come the Stuka dive bombers, their infamous sirens, the Jericho trumpets, tearing through the air before they peel off to drop their payload on the packed sand. From behind you, from the fields of Flanders, comes a low, persistent rumble. For 2 days, that rumble had been kept at a distance, held back by a strange, and for you, miraculous order. This is the real historical moment where our world was born. German panzers, having blitzed their way to the coast, were ordered to halt. Historians still argue whether this was Hitler's colossal blunder, a political gesture to a British Empire he strangely admired, or simply a tactical decision to let the Luftwaffe, his air force, deliver the final blow. In our world, that halt gave the British just enough time. The little ships, the fishing trawlers, the yachts, the civilian flotilla, they all came and performed a miracle. But not here, not tonight. You see a flash of movement on the dunes. A lone British officer lowers his binoculars, his face pale. The rumble from behind is changing, growing louder, closer. The halt is over. The German tanks are moving in for the kill. The Stukas overhead suddenly seem like the lesser of two evils. You can hear shouting down the beach, a frantic energy replacing the exhausted waiting. The neat lines of men that snake towards the water are breaking apart. There are no more ships to board, only targets to be strafed. You and the 300,000 men of the British Expeditionary Force are trapped. There will be no triumphant return, no defiant speech about fighting on the beaches. For you, the war ends right here in the cold surf of Dunkirk, with the clatter of tank treads becoming the last sound you hear. That catastrophic loss on the French coast, what the new censored newspapers are calling the Dunkirk readjustment, has left a silence hanging over Britain. Not a peaceful silence, but a hollow waiting one. You now stand on the chalky cliffs of Dover, the salty wind whipping at your coat. In the fields behind you sit the strange abandoned relics of a previous generation's fears. The acoustic mirrors, giant concrete dishes built to listen for enemy aircraft across the water. They were obsolete almost as soon as they were finished, made redundant by the quiet miracle of radar. But now you find yourself wishing they still worked, wishing for any advantage at all. Because the real battle has begun, and it's happening right above your head. Every day, the sky is a canvas of contrails. The deep guttural drone of Heinkel and Dornier bombers is met by the higher-pitched scream of Messerschmitt fighters. And for a while they are answered by the glorious roar of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engines in the Spitfires and Hurricanes of the RAF. The evening news delivered by a radio announcer whose voice grows tighter each day speaks of heroic victories and lopsided kill ratios. But you can see the truth in the smoke plumes rising from the airfields inland. In our history, a single stray German bomber lost on its mission would accidentally drop its payload on London. This would infuriate Churchill, who would order a retaliatory raid on Berlin, which in turn would so enrage Hitler that he would pivot the entire German air strategy to terror-bombing civilians. It was a mistake, a godsend that gave the battered RAF time to breathe, repair, and regroup. But here, that mistake is never made. The Luftwaffe stays ruthlessly, brutally on target. They ignore the cities. Day after day, you watch the waves of bombers, escorted by swarms of yellow-nosed fighters, methodically picking apart the infrastructure of Britain's defense. The radar masts of the Dowding system, the nation's electronic eyes, are toppled one by one. The aircraft factories in Weybridge and Southampton are reduced to rubble. Historians in our world still debate if the RAF's skilled pilots could have held out against a perfectly sustained German assault on their bases. In this world, you are learning the answer. The defiant roar of the Merlins grows fainter. The dogfights become fewer. One afternoon, you look up, and the sky is filled only with the sound of German engines flying in neat, unhurried formations. They fly with the arrogance of ownership. The Battle of Britain is over. The eagles have prevailed, and the silence they leave behind is the sound of a nation laid bare, waiting for the final blow to land. Beneath the oppressive silence of a German-owned sky, a new kind of waiting begins. You are now a member of the local defense volunteers, soon to be renamed the Home Guard. It sounds terribly official, but in reality, you're standing watch with a farmer named Arthur who has a shotgun from his grandfather and an antique hunting rifle you're not entirely sure how to load. Every church bell in the land has been silenced, ordered to ring, only to signal an invasion. The silence of the bells is a constant nagging reminder of what's coming. The professionals, the real army, are mostly gone lost in the disaster at Dunkirk. You are what's left. It's a bit of a joke, really. A grim one. You are the dad's army that will have to face the most efficient military machine on the planet. The nights are the worst. You've heard hushed, frantic whispers of desperate countermeasures. Secret pipelines running into the surf, designed to pump crude oil onto the surface of the sea and set it ablaze. A sea of fire to greet the invaders. It sounds mad, a last-ditch scheme born of sheer terror, but you pray it's real. You pray for storms, for gale-force winds, for anything that might make the treacherous English Channel impassable. But the weather doesn't listen. For 3 straight days, the sea has been as calm as a mill pond. And this morning, a thick, wet fog has rolled in, blanketing the coast in a shroud of gray. It's quiet. Too quiet. Military historians in another lifetime would argue for decades that Operation Sea Lion, the German plan for invading Britain, was a fantasy. They would point to the German Navy's weakness and the absurdity of using converted river barges, slow, clumsy, and utterly at the mercy of the waves to cross the channel. They would say the Royal Navy would have slaughtered them. But their calculations didn't factor in a sky empty of Spitfires. They didn't factor in this fog. And as the morning sun begins to burn through the mist, you see them. A ghost fleet. Not the sleek destroyers of the Royal Navy, but a vast, almost uncountable swarm of low, flat barges churning the placid water. There are hundreds of them, a moving island of steel and gray uniforms. The sea of fire never ignites. A Stuka, appearing as if from nowhere, drops a single bomb that shatters the local pillbox before your coastal artillery can even fire a shot. The church bells begin to ring a frantic clanging peal of alarm that is almost immediately drowned out by the roar of Junkers bombers sweeping in low over the beaches. Ramps crash down into the shingle. You see the soldiers, the Wehrmacht, splashing ashore. Their methodical, disciplined advance, a terrifying contrast to the panicked chaos of your defense. The fog of war is real, and it has delivered the enemy to your doorstep. The retreat from the coast is a chaotic, desperate affair. The promise you heard on the wireless, those defiant, rumbling words from Churchill about fighting on the beaches and in the fields, now feels like a bitter memory from a forgotten age. The fighting happens, yes, but it is short, brutal, and hopelessly one-sided. Your dad's army, for all its courage, is swept aside by panzer divisions that don't even seem to slow down. Historians would later question if this scattered amateur resistance was worth the cost, or if it merely served as a pretext for the occupiers' ruthlessness. You push inland one of a river of refugees clogging the roads to London, the drone of German aircraft, a constant companion overhead. You don't feel like a soldier anymore. You feel like a survivor, and only barely. London is a city holding its breath, bracing for an impact it cannot possibly withstand. The ancient streets are choked with makeshift barricades made from overturned buses, furniture, and paving stones torn from the ground. It's a scene of defiant futility. The siege you expected a long, drawn-out struggle never materializes. Instead, the Luftwaffe, with no opposition, simply dismantles the city's will from the air. For 7 days, precision bombing targets government buildings, communication centers, and key intersections, paralyzing the capital. Then the rumors begin spreading faster than the fires. Whispers of a nighttime departure from a hidden port of a Royal Navy cruiser slipping through the blockade bound for Canada. The royal family, the living symbol of the nation, is gone. Soon after, word follows that Churchill and the remnants of Parliament have followed suit, fleeing to establish a government in exile. The end comes, not with a bang, but with a profoundly unsettling silence. One morning, the bombing just stops. The quiet is broken by the unfamiliar sound of German being spoken through loudspeakers on military trucks, calmly instructing citizens to surrender all weapons and obey the curfew. And then you see it. A flash of red, white, and black against the gray stone of Buckingham Palace. A swastika flag hanging limp in the still air. The sight is so wrong, so physically sickening, that it feels like a hallucination. In the evening, the BBC crackles back to life, but the voice is different. It's clipped, aristocratic, and chillingly familiar. Sir Oswald Mosley, the longtime leader of the British Union of Fascists, announces the formation of a new government of peace and Anglo-German understanding. He speaks of order and stability, of Britain taking its rightful place in the new European family. As he speaks, the sun sets over the Thames. It might be rising on a new day, somewhere far away, perhaps in Korea. But here, as you watch German soldiers patrol past a famous red telephone box, you know with absolute certainty that the sun has just set on the British Empire for good. Life in occupied London quickly settles into a grim, monotonous routine, but your story moves on. The gears of the great German war machine, having crushed Western Europe, now turn eastward. You are no longer a defender on a beach, but a soldier in a field gray uniform standing on the new border in Poland. For months, you have watched Soviet trains rumble past laden with the grain and oil promised to the Reich by Stalin in their cynical, non-aggression pact. It's a treaty of convenience, and its expiration date is drawing near. There is a feeling in the air, a sense of immense coiled power. In our history, this coiled spring would be weakened by the need to garrison France, watch Britain, and launch messy, time-consuming invasions of Greece and Yugoslavia. The invasion of Russia, Operation Barbarossa, would be delayed until late June. But not here. There is no active Western front. Britain is a docile, defeated puppet. The Balkans are quiet. It is late April 1941. The spring mud has dried. The full, undivided, battle-hardened might of the Wehrmacht is arrayed along this one border. You are part of the largest invasion force ever assembled in the history of mankind. At 3:15 a.m., the sky erupts. The artillery barrage is so immense, it feels like the world is tearing itself apart. Then you move. The advance is shockingly, unbelievably fast. Historians in another time would forever debate whether Stalin was truly fooled by Hitler or simply frozen by a catastrophic failure of imagination. From your vantage point in a half-track, rumbling past burning border posts, the surprise looks total and complete. The initial resistance is a strange mix of suicidal bravery and total chaos. You encounter some of their monstrous tanks like the T-35, a land battleship with 5 turrets sticking out at odd angles. It looks terrifying, like a rolling fortress, but it's slow, clumsy, and your seasoned anti-tank crews deal with it efficiently. These machines are symbols of the Soviet army itself, huge, intimidating, and terribly flawed. You bypass pockets of resistance, pushing ever deeper into the vast, flat expanse of the steppe. The days are long and hot, stretching out under a relentless sun, the kind of endless summer afternoon that might be settling over a peaceful city like Dijon right now. But here, the air is choked with the dust of 1,000 tanks, and the horizon is perpetually smudged with smoke. The officers are jubilant, speaking of victory, not in months, but in weeks. There is no distraction, no second front, no drain of resources. This is the unbroken storm, and it feels to you utterly unstoppable. The unbroken storm you were part of in the early summer has become a relentless, grinding advance. The great encirclements at Minsk and Kiev were textbook victories, swallowing entire Soviet armies. You've seen things that will haunt your sleep for years, but the momentum is undeniable. Now, it is early October. In the history that was supposed to be, this is the moment the heavens would open up. The Rasputitsa, the autumn rains, would turn the landscape into an ocean of thick, impassable mud, stopping the German offensive cold just miles from Moscow. After the mud would come General Winter, the terrifying Russian cold that would freeze a poorly equipped army in its tracks. But you are not miles from Moscow. You are on its outskirts. That 2-month head start you gained in the spring meant you outran the seasons. The ground beneath your boots is still firm. The fight for the city itself is the hardest you have ever known. Every street is contested, every apartment block a fortress. But the defense is fractured, lacking central command. The Red Army is a body with its head cut off. As your unit pushes towards the city center, you are suddenly thrown to the ground by a colossal explosion from a grand hotel a block away. Then another from a government ministry. The Soviets, in their final nihilistic act of defiance, have mined their own capital. Just as they did in Kiev, they are detonating thousands of hidden explosives by radio command, a scorched earth policy of unimaginable spite. It's terrifying, but it is the chaos of an ending, not the strategy of a defense. Finally, you break through into the vast open expanse of Red Square. It is surreal. The candy-striped domes of St. Basil's Cathedral stand unharmed, a splash of fairy tale color in a city of gray smoke. You watch, mesmerized, as a team of engineers scales the Kremlin's Spasskaya Tower. They pry the giant ruby-red star from its mooring and send it crashing to the paving stones below. In its place, they unfurl the stark black and white Reich war flag. What became of Stalin is now a ghost story, a question that would be debated for a century. Did he escape on a hidden train to the Urals? Was he killed in the final hours by one of his own generals? No one knows. With its brain gone, the Soviet Union simply ceases to be. It fractures into a dozen warring fiefdoms. As dusk settles, the last rays of the sun, perhaps the same light that is gently fading from the sky in Dijon, catch the gilded domes of the Kremlin. But the long shadow stretching out from the flagpole now belongs to the swastika. The war in the East is over. The war in the East is when the swastika flies over Paris, London, and now Moscow. And you're now sitting in a comfortable armchair in Cleveland, Ohio, listening to the news on the radio. The light outside is fading into that warm, hazy glow of a late July afternoon, the kind of peaceful evening settling over places like Dijon on the other side of the world. But the voice coming from the crackling speaker in your living room is painting a picture of a planet that has been fundamentally broken in two. With the British Empire decapitated and the Soviet Union erased from the map, America stands utterly alone. President Roosevelt's policy of aiding the Allies is now moot. There are no more allies to aid. The arguments that were once on the political fringe now take center stage. The America First Committee, championed by the heroic aviator Charles Lindbergh, is no longer an isolationist fringe group. They sound like sober-minded prophets. Their message, "Why should our boys die for the lost causes of Europe?" resonates in every town square. You recall seeing strange newsreels a few years ago of the German-American Bund holding a rally in Madison Square Garden, a giant banner of George Washington hanging between two swastikas. It seemed like a bizarre joke then. Nobody is laughing now. The idea of launching an invasion to reclaim Europe with no friendly shore to land on has shifted from a strategic challenge to a logistical fantasy. Historians in another world will forever argue over Roosevelt's next move had fate not intervened at Pearl Harbor. But in this new reality, the calculation has changed for everyone. The German Reich is a continental superpower. Imperial Japan is carving up the Pacific. To fight both at once would be national suicide. And so, the unthinkable happens. Diplomats begin to talk, not as friends, but as two predators circling each other, suddenly realizing that a fight to the death might kill them both. The result signed in the neutral territory of Iceland is a cold, pragmatic pact, a non-aggression treaty. The Reich agrees to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. The United States agrees to recognize the new order in Europe. It is not peace. It is a line drawn down the center of the Atlantic Ocean, a planetary truce. You switch off the radio, and the room falls silent. America is safe for now. But the world you grew up in, the world of shared values and transatlantic cousins, has vanished. There is now our half of the planet and their half. And between them lies a vast and terrifying silence. That cold peace, that line drawn down the Atlantic, allows the Reich to turn its gaze inward and eastward. The age of conquest is over. The age of construction has begun. You find yourself back in Europe in Berlin, or rather, in the place where Berlin used to be. The city you knew is gone, replaced by the world's largest, dustiest, and most terrifying construction site. Entire historic districts have been leveled to carve out a new, impossibly grand north-south axis boulevard. This is the birthing ground of Welthauptstadt Germania, the world capital Germania, the architectural fever dream of the Führer and his master builder, Albert Speer. Your eye catches on a truly bizarre sight, a monstrous cylinder of solid concrete squatting in a park like a forgotten piece of some giant's game. It's the Schwerbelastungskörper, the heavy load-bearing body, an experimental structure built years ago simply to see if Berlin's marshy ground could even withstand the weight of the planned triumphal arch. The sheer hubris is almost comical. They had to stress test the very earth before they could build their fantasy upon it. But you're not laughing now, because you can see the fantasy taking shape all around you. In the distance, blotting out the setting sun, is the project's heart of darkness, the Volkshalle, the People's Hall. Its copper dome, based on the real historical plans, is so vast that it would generate its own weather with the breath of 180,000 spectators, literally forming clouds beneath its ceiling. It is a temple built for a state that worships itself, designed to make every single person inside it feel like an insignificant ant. You ask yourself, who builds all this? And the answer shuffles past you in long gray columns at the end of the workday. They are the Osterarbeiter, the Eastern workers. Gaunt faces, hollow eyes, the captured peoples of the former Soviet Union and Poland marched from their grim barracks to the building sites and back again. They are the human fuel for this new world. This monumental city is just one side of the coin. The other is Lebensraum, the living space being brutally carved out of the East. You hear stories of German families being given sprawling estates in Ukraine, the former owners simply gone. Economists in a future time would debate the sustainability of an empire built entirely on theft and slave labor. But here in the long shadows of Germania, the system appears to be working with brutal efficiency. You stand there as one train packed with human chattel rumbles slowly east, while another laden with stolen resources rumbles west. The peace of the new order is the sound of this monstrous continental machine grinding away. The great monuments of Germania rise built on a foundation of slave labor, and the eastern territories are tamed with relentless brutality. The Reich is a continental fortress, secure in its own hemisphere. But across the Atlantic, America remains a silent, watchful rival. The Cold Peace is little more than a staring contest, and the Reich intends to be the one that doesn't blink. For that, it needs more than just tanks and soldiers. It needs a final, unanswerable argument. And you learn that deep in a secret facility in the Harz Mountains, they have been building one. This is the home of the Uranverein, the Uranium Club, Germany's nuclear research program. In our history, it was a sputtering failure, hobbled by scientific rivalries, a lack of resources, and a few critical miscalculations by its famous leader, Werner Heisenberg. Physicists and historians would argue for decades whether Heisenberg secretly sabotaged the project or was simply unequal to the task. Here, with the continent's finest minds and materials at his command, and with no active war draining his budget, the question answers itself. He succeeds. The heroic Norwegian commandos, who in our world destroyed the Reich's heavy water plant in a daring raid, are here just a forgotten skirmish. that vital bottleneck is overcome. The path is clear. One day, a sterile, almost boring announcement is read over the state radio. A test has been conducted on a deserted island in the Baltic. A new source of concentrated energy release has been successfully demonstrated. There is no fiery speech, no gloating, just a cold clinical statement of fact that changes the world forever. The Reich has the atomic bomb. They don't even have to use it. They just have to have it. The V-2 rockets, once terror weapons of limited strategic use, are now being mass-produced by the same slaves who built Germania. Their range is improved. Their purpose is perfected. They can now deliver a piece of the sun to New York, to Washington, to Chicago. The cold peace is instantly transformed. It's no longer a pact between equals. It is now a threat. The Reich doesn't need to cross the ocean. It can simply point its new atomic shadow at the heart of America and wait. This weapon is the ultimate guarantor of the new order, the final, terrifying lock on the cage. As evening draws in wherever you are, you can feel that shadow. It's not the gentle, natural twilight of a day's end in a city like Dijon. It is a cold, permanent, and artificial darkness that has fallen over the entire planet. It is the shadow of the atom held in one hand, and it demands not a truce, but absolute submission. That atomic shadow has brought with it a new kind of global quiet. But what is life like living directly under the source of that shadow? Let's imagine you are one of the winners, a racially pure citizen of the greater German Reich, living out a perfectly average day. You wake up in a clean, modern apartment block to the sound of heroic music from your state-issued Volksempfänger radio. The news that follows speaks of record harvests in the Ukrainian territories and new production milestones for the Strength Through Joy car factory. It all sounds wonderful. You walk to work through wide, clean streets. You pass your local block warden and you exchange the stiff-armed Hitler salute. Your gesture must be sharp committed. Not too lazy, not too theatrical. It's a tiny mundane performance, one of 100 you'll do before the day is out. Sociologists in a freer world would debate for a century whether the propaganda machine created a populace of true believers or simply a nation of skilled actors terrified of a bad review. For you, the difference is purely academic. You play your part. Today is Sunday, and you know that for dinner, your family will be having a simple, watery stew. It's the first Sunday of the month, which means it's Eintopfsonntag, one-pot Sunday. Everyone eats the same cheap meal, and the money saved is donated to the state. It's a perfect little piece of social pressure disguised as community spirit. At the office, your colleagues are buzzing about their upcoming state-sponsored holidays. One is going on a cruise to the Norwegian fjords, another to a beach resort in occupied Greece. The Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy program, ensures every loyal worker gets their subsidized vacation. It's one of the great bargains of the New Order. Give us your mind, your soul, and your unquestioning obedience, and we'll give you 2 weeks of sun and sand. It's all so comfortable, so orderly. The prosperity is real. You just have to learn not to ask where it comes from. You don't ask who made the cheap and plentiful goods in the shops. You ignore the gaunt, foreign-looking laborers who sweep the streets in the pre-dawn hours. You don't mention the neighbors who vanished years ago. The entire system runs on a collective, unspoken agreement to not pull at the threads. As evening draws in, perhaps around the same time it is in Dijon, you sit at your dinner table. You eat your patriotic stew. You are safe. You are secure. You are a model citizen of the 1,000-year Reich. And you are profoundly, terrifyingly unfree. Years pass inside your gilded cage. You live your life as a model citizen. Your children join the Hitler Youth. You take your strength through joy holidays, and you eat your one-pot stew on the appointed Sundays. The Reich feels permanent, monolithic, eternal. Its architect, the Führer, is now an old man, a remote godlike figure who appears only in carefully managed films. The system is stable. And then one evening, it isn't. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the city, just as it is surely setting over the peaceful hills of Dijon, the jovial music on the radio cuts out mid-song. A long, painful silence is followed by a trembling, grief-choked voice. The Führer, Adolf Hitler, has passed away peacefully in his mountain retreat. The official story is a quiet, dignified end after a life of struggle and triumph. But the whispers begin almost immediately. Historians would forever speculate about the truth of that night. Was it really old age, or was his end assisted? A gentle push into the great beyond by one of his ambitious heirs. A state funeral of unparalleled pomp is announced, but beneath the veneer of forced national mourning, a vicious power struggle erupts. The designated successor has always been the bombastic chief of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring. You picture him at Harrenhal, his gaudy forest palace surrounded by stolen art, and his pet lion expecting a crown to be placed on his head. But he is opposed by the true power in the state, the chillingly methodical Heinrich Himmler, head of the black uniformed SS, and the master manipulator of the party bureaucracy, Martin Bormann. The conflict isn't settled with speeches. It's settled in the dark. You are woken one night by unfamiliar sirens and the squeal of tires in the street below. The next day, the newspapers are filled with terse announcements of high-ranking officials suddenly taking early retirement for health reasons. It's a terrifying echo of the past, a second night of the long knives. This isn't about street brawlers anymore. It's a high-tech purge. SS security forces surround Air Force command centers. Göring's key allies are arrested in their beds. The state, which seemed like a single solid block of granite, is suddenly revealing its bloody internal seams. After a week of terrifying uncertainty, a new face dominates the television screens. It is Himmler. He calmly announces that he has assumed control as Reich steward to protect the Führer's legacy from traitors. The crisis is over, but for the first time, you have seen a crack in the concrete. The gods of the Reich are not only mortal, they are cannibals. The bloody palace intrigue that brought Himmler to power eventually settles into a new, colder stability back in the heartland of the Reich. Decades pass. You are now a young man, born long after the great victories, a child of the triumphant 1,000-year Reich. You've been raised on stories of the heroes who conquered Europe, and now it is your turn to serve. You are conscripted into the Wehrmacht for your 2-year tour of duty. But you are not assigned to the ceremonial guard in Germania or a cushy post on the French coast. You are sent east to the vast, supposedly pacified territories of the former Soviet Union. Your mission is officially designated as anti-partisan operations. Your commanding officer, a weary veteran with a cynical smile, calls it bandit hunting. You soon learn that the war never really ended here. It just atomized. In the endless forests, in the vast swamps, and in the foothills of the Ural Mountains, the fight grinds on. The children and grandchildren of the soldiers shattered in 1941 have been waging a relentless insurgency for 50 years. Military theorists would call it a classic asymmetric conflict. You call it hell. Your patrols aren't in advanced armored carriers. The terrain is too rough. Instead, you find yourself riding a tough, shaggy little local horse known as a pange pony, the very same kind the Partisans use. It's a surreal, low-tech reality, far from the gleaming propaganda of home. The enemy is a ghost. You never see them, but you see their work everywhere. A stretch of railway track for a supply train twisted into a pretzel by a midnight explosion. A sniper's single shot from a tree line a kilometer away. A patrol that goes out and simply doesn't come back. The Soviet partisans of the Great War were masters of guerrilla tactics. Their descendants have had 2 generations to refine that bloody inheritance. The Reich's response is predictable and brutal. Entire villages are razed in reprisal for one cut telephone line. But the violence only serves to breed more hatred, more ghosts. As the sun begins its slow descent, that time around 6 p.m. when the day gives up its fight, you find yourself on watch staring out at an endless sea of birch trees. The light here in the east never seems bright and clear. It's a permanent hazy twilight. The Reich may have won the war, but it has lost the peace. You are a conqueror who holds nothing but the ground under your boots, and you have the unsettling feeling that this endless secret war will outlive you and the empire itself. You've finished your tour of duty hunting ghosts in the east and have returned to the civilized, orderly heart of the Reich. You try to settle back into a normal life to wash the memory of the endless Twilight War from your mind. One afternoon, you decide to visit one of the new state art galleries in Germania. It's getting late, close to closing time, and the vast marble halls are quiet and cool. The setting sun, the same one that's bringing the day to a close in places like Daejeon streams through the colossal windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. The museum is a temple to art that has nothing to say. You wander from room to room, past an endless procession of technically perfect but utterly soulless paintings. Here is a canvas of a square-jawed farmer, gazing with heroic determination at his unnaturally golden wheat. Here is a sculpture of a perfect Aryan family, their faces blank and serene. Here are a dozen portraits of party officials, all looking vaguely constipated with the burden of their own importance. It's all so beige. Decades ago, the state waged a war on what it called entartete Kunst, or degenerate art. The vibrant, chaotic emotional works of masters like Picasso, Kandinsky, and Klee were purged, burned, or stolen. This sterile state-approved art is what grew in the ashes. It's art that has been house-trained. This cultural deep freeze extends everywhere. The cinemas play the same 2 kinds of films, bombastic war epics about the ancient victory over Russia, or cloyingly sweet romantic comedies where nothing interesting ever happens. The radio plays either thunderous Wagnerian marches or bland folksy music that sounds like it was written by a committee. Cultural critics in another world would argue this was the inevitable result of the Reich's ideology, which was fundamentally hostile to the doubt and rebellion that fuels real creativity. You remember being taken as a child to a Thingstadt, one of those huge semi-pagan outdoor amphitheaters the early regime built for mass rallies. Even then, it was falling into disuse, a weird, weedy monument to a forced spirituality that never quite took. As you leave the museum, the stale, recycled air inside seems to follow you out. The Reich has built a perfect, orderly, and powerful society. It has conquered and consolidated a continent. But in doing so, It has suffocated the very spark of human expression, leaving a world that is not only unfree, but unbearably dull. The cultural boredom you felt in the museum has begun to seep into everything. It's been decades now since the Great Victory, and you are old enough to notice that the world isn't as shiny as it used to be. The Reich is beginning to fray at the edges. You see it in small things first. The trains, once the symbol of Teutonic punctuality, are now frequently late. The magnificent autobahns are riddled with potholes that take months to repair. The marble facades of Germania's grandest buildings are stained with pollution, and the once pristine parks feel a little neglected. It's a slow, creeping decay, like a magnificent house whose owners have lost the will to maintain it. The quality of life, the great promise of the regime, is also showing wear. In the state-run shops, you find yourself buying more and more ersatz goods, the polite term for inferior substitutes. The coffee is a bitter swill made from roasted acorns. The soap doesn't lather properly. The clothes wear out twice as fast. These were necessities during the Great War, but that was a lifetime ago. Now it's just a sign that the vast continental economy is sputtering. The initial economic miracle of the Reich was never a miracle at all. It was simply the spoils of conquest. It was the frantic energy of a war machine, not the sustainable rhythm of a healthy economy. Now that the looting is over, the system is choking on its own inefficiency and corruption. The technological edge is dulling too. The generation that created the jet engine and the atomic bomb is gone, and they have not been replaced. Innovation requires freedom debate and the ability to challenge orthodoxy, three things the Reich cannot tolerate. While you hear whispers of incredible new technologies emerging from the isolated Americas, things called computers and satellites, the Reich's factories are still churning out slightly bigger, slightly louder versions of 1940s technology. Economists in a freer world would endlessly debate the primary cause of the rot. Was it the corrosive effect of a slave labor system? The dead hand of a command economy run by party cronies? Or the simple fact that genius cannot flourish in a cage? You suspect it's all three. As evening deepens over the city, that time when day finally surrenders to night, you look out at the grand avenues of the capital. Half the monumental streetlights are dark. The city flickers. The 1,000-year Reich, it turns out, is rusting from the inside out. You are walking home through the tired streets of the rusting capital. It is late in the day, that quiet moment just before 6 in the evening, when the city exhales. You've long since accepted the gray reality of the Reich. It is a slow, grinding decline, but it is still total. The state's grip is weaker, but still absolute. You remember hearing the whispered stories from your grandparents' generation about the futile acts of resistance from the early days. The swing Jugend, the swing kids who defiantly listened to forbidden American jazz, and the White Rose, the university students in Munich who were caught and executed for printing anti-regime leaflets. Their bravery was magnificent, and it changed nothing. Resistance is a ghost story, told to scare children into obedience. You turn down a narrow side street, a shortcut through a grimy workaday district that the great architects of Germania never bothered to demolish. And that's when you see it. Your breath catches in your throat. There on a soot-stained brick wall, someone has painted a small, simple, and impossibly dangerous picture. A single white rose. The symbol of the martyred students unseen in public for nearly 100 years. It is crudely drawn, a hasty act of midnight courage. your lifetime of conditioning kicks in. You feel a jolt of pure fear, your eyes darting around for a block warden, an informant, anyone. You should hurry away. You should pretend you never saw it. But you don't. You just stand there frozen. A young couple walks past you, their eyes flicking towards the wall. They see it too. They don't speak. Their faces remain blank masks. But for a fraction of a second, their eyes meet, and a spark of silent understanding passes between them. Then they are gone, disappearing around the corner. Historians will never know which tiny act of defiance is the one that truly matters, the single snowflake that starts the avalanche. By morning, the rose will be gone, scrubbed away, or painted over. The person who painted it may well be arrested. And yet the perfect monolithic silence of the Reich has been broken. As you finally continue on your way home, the image of that defiant little flower is burned into your mind. It is only a splash of white paint in a vast and decaying empire, but it feels like a seed finally taking root in a crack in the concrete. And for the first time in your life, you allow yourself to think that perhaps 1,000 years doesn't last forever. And so our journey into this shadowed world comes to a gentle close. The images of towering, sterile monuments and the quiet fear in the streets can now begin to soften and fade away. That alternate path of history, with its cold triumphs and long, slow decay, was just that, a path not taken, a story whispered in the dark. The little white, Rosa's symbol of hope in that fictional twilight, can now recede, leaving only the quiet comfort of your own room, the gentle hum of the fan, and the soft weight of your blanket. Let the what-ifs of history dissolve into the peace of the present moment as the story ends and your own quiet, restful dreams begin. Sweet dreams.
you.